The following is my interview with Dr. Bruce Murphy, the 14th president of Centenary University, which took place December 13th, 2023. Absolutely. So, if I did my research correct, you arrived at Centenary in January 2020, just right before the pandemic struck. I was just curious if you could describe some of these initial challenges that you faced when arriving at this time, and how did you navigate these early days of your presidency during such a unique and challenging time?
Yeah, well, I didn't know it was a unique and challenging time that much when I first arrived. Nobody did. This is the classic surprise that happened, and I frequently have joked that the board and the interviewing committee did not tell me about this ahead of time. Nobody knew. I'll tell you, when you take over a new institution, you want to do things. You don't want to break any glass. You want to come in and find out what's strong and build on it, and find out what's not so strong and ease that out. So I think you want to be fairly careful about that. I'll be honest with you. I thought that the biggest challenge that I would face in my entire presidency was the incident that happened before I took over, and that was they did some downsizing, and they released to let go a number of professors, 9 professors, and among those were several that were tenured, and that's kind of like a third rail in higher education. And so I was at a conference that January, and I was talking to people, and I told them that I had that, and I got the same reaction from them. Well, wow, that's a big challenge. And so I thought that would be the biggest challenge during my presidency. Little did I know. One of the things that I did at the beginning was we started a strategic planning process, and I gathered people from all various sectors, from staff, from faculty, from community, from students, very importantly from students, and had some great input. And we put together a vision and a mission statement, and started to work on objectives and so forth. Did that early. I could have waited. I think if I'd have waited, it would have been disastrous. We never would have been able to do it during the pandemic. And so we did that in January. Actually had, I think, a meeting in January and 3 meetings in February. And that really served as a great foundation for the rest of my tenure at Centenary. And we used that. We wound up having over 36 meetings over the course of 3 years and so forth. So I think that was really important to do strategic planning, because when the pandemic hit, it basically was like an atom bomb for everybody. It wasn't just us; it was everybody was going through this, regardless of whether you're higher education, whether you're business, whether you're no matter what you're doing. It was very traumatic.
Hmm.
But we had the strategic plan, and I gathered the cabinet together, and I said, "Well, what should we do? Should we drop that and focus only on the pandemic, or should we add an objective to the strategic plan that says operate in a post-pandemic environment?" And that's what we chose to do. And we generated, within that objective, I think we generated maybe 15 or 16 unique key performance indicators, and we worked at those, and those were the things that drove us through the pandemic. So it was very, that I didn't know it at the time, but it was very helpful that we started with strategic planning and then integrated our work about the pandemic into that strategic planning model. So I mean, that's the things that happened in that first 45 days or so, between the time I took office and the time the pandemic hit.
Mm. Yeah. So would you say it was difficult balancing the need for academic continuity with the health and well-being of students and faculty and staff especially when it comes in making decisions so quickly?
I would say yes. Yeah, it was. It was difficult, but you have to remember that academics is our mission. That's why
Hmm.
we exist. We exist for academics. So we had to figure out a way to do both.
Right.
And so certainly the health and welfare of students, staff, faculty, visitors, and everybody else is really important, and we have to maintain that. At the same time, we have to do the mission, which is the academics. Now that's where we had, I guess, 2 different challenges. The first challenge on the health side is nobody knew what to do.
Hmm.
In retrospect, people will say masks are good, masks are bad, whatever they say. They'll say vaccinations are good, vaccinations are bad. But at the time, we didn't know.
Right, right.
So we had to take this ongoing. It was a ever evolving kind of information, and there was no how to book. You would expect something like this. Oh, the trucks are going to arrive out front, and we're going to offload equipment and things and stuff. No, none of that happened. We had to figure it out on our own. And fortunately, we worked a lot with our sister schools. We talked a lot to the other New Jersey schools, the independents, and the ICUNs, the Association of Colleges and Universities in New Jersey. And so we worked with them a lot. Almost, I think we talked almost on a daily basis. We'd have a conference call, and we would talk about that. The academic part was harder because I don't know if you recall, but Centenary had some online presence, but not much, not a
Hmm.
whole lot. And we certainly weren't teaching, lots of classes online. And so we had to figure out how to do that. On the 16th of March in 2020, the governor, the state told us, okay, no more in-person classes. So everybody was on this, Princeton, Montclair State, everybody on an even playing field. Nobody can have classes. So what do you do? I think we were kind of lucky, and I've said this many times. We were lucky in several ways. One way was we didn't have humongous classes to begin with, so the idea of having spaced out, social distance and so forth was not that hard for us. And another thing is our revenue streams didn't rely on large numbers. We didn't have 10,000 dorm rooms to fill. We didn't have a 70,000 seat stadium to fill.
Right.
Things like that. That some
Yeah.
schools rely on those things to generate their revenue. We didn't have that, so we kind of lucked out. The other thing was we were in where we are situated out in Warren County, kind of in a more woodsy atmosphere. We were not in a major metropolitan area where some schools are, and that created a lot of problems for them. So we got a little bit lucky in some of those things. But I think the thing that helped us, and I've said this before, that helped us the most was the IT department.
Hmm.
They had done some things a few years before that some were popular, some were not so popular, but they had integrated such that we had Moodle in every class. Every class had to have a Moodle site, and that's not true at every school. Uh, so they had to have a Moodle site, and there's a great variety. Some professors only used it for putting the grades in. Okay, other professors had all kinds of videos on it. They had backup stuff. They had reading. They put their lessons on it and so forth. So it was a big variety. But they had done that a couple of years before. If that hadn't been in place, I don't know how we would have made the change.
Right.
Fortunately, I didn't have to figure that out.
Yeah.
But we made the change thanks to that, and thanks to the IT office then very, very aggressively giving classes to faculty on how do you do this stuff? How is that done? And they did that, and it was so the faculty accepted that, and they in fact voted. They collected it for the guy that was doing that out of the IT office. They took up a collection and gave him some money, so just to tell you how much they appreciate it. So we
Wow.
were able to do that, and because we were able to do that, and one more thing about luck in the transition, going from almost totally in class to totally online. We did that. The word came out over spring break. Students were gone, so we didn't have to send students home. We just told them don't come back.
Mm.
So that was easier. And then when classes were to start up, by that time, faculty had about a week to get ready to transfer and so forth. And we went up. And I'm very proud of this, of the job that the faculty and the students and everybody's staff did in doing this. We made that transition without missing a single day of instruction.
Wow.
And we were one of, I don't know how
Huh.
many others in the country did the same thing, but that was a very, very big thing for us. I had a colleague, I won't say what school, but it was one of the Ivy League schools, and they didn't have a online classes at all before the pandemic. And the president told me when they made the switch to totally online, they were using cell phones. That's how they were teaching. They were teaching
Wow.
from cell
That's
phones.
incredible. Is aside from these challenges, were there any unexpected positive outcomes or any innovations that are now permanent in place at Centenary that will forever be part of the process of learning
I
there?
can't speak for forever, but I can speak for yes, yes. As a matter of fact, there were, they talk about silver linings. They talk about, what happens out of it. And so that's a great question. So look at us now. We're talking on Zoom. We never used Zoom before that. We would have in-person meetings, so I tracked this mentally as we were going through it. And so, for example, faculty meeting. I've been to faculty meetings before the pandemic, and you get mixed attendance. Not everybody shows up. People come in late, people leave early, people not, so forth. Not that they were bad, but that's just the way meetings are. That's the nature of meetings. People have conflicts. They
Hmm.
might be driving home, they might be driving to work, they might have an evening class, whatever. When we started going to Zoom for those meetings, not just the faculty Senate meetings, the faculty meetings, but they really became much more efficient. We knew who was there, more attendance went dramatically up for those kinds of meetings. You got more input. People could put stuff in chat. You could send stuff to people instantly, get reactions. They vote now. They vote now. On those in the Zooms or the Teams, either one. And just it was just so that's a revelation that we're not going to go back.
Hmm.
We're going to use that now. We people like to get together, so they'll be mixed. But for lots of meetings that you can't attend or be too expensive to attend, we did that. Same thing happened with conferences, academic conferences. Same thing happened with other kinds of meetings. I used to say that if I had a meeting with the other presidents down in Trenton, that would be an all day event. I'd go down there, drive, spend a couple hours getting there, go to the meeting for a couple hours, grab lunch, spend a couple hours, come back, and that's time to go home. So
Hmm. Yeah.
but then during with these e-conferences and Zoom and Teams and so forth, you put in the meeting. Now the downside of that is we had a lot more meetings. So yeah, you put that president's meeting in, and then you've got another meeting right behind it, another meeting right behind it. So I know that we were having more meetings because it was a little bit easier. So that's one thing that nature of that. The other thing is when I first got there, we had one position at the university that was working remote. And that was the webmaster. We had a webmaster. She lived in Connecticut. I never saw her face to face. I only saw her, electronically. And she was, it's a job you can do it remotely. When this happened and everybody had to go home, we started thinking, well, what other jobs can we do? We can do, for example, if a professor is teaching a class and it's an online class, they don't have to come to work. They can do that from home if they have the right technology. If we, do other things that it can be done that way. We've had several different positions that we looked at, and there's a great benefit to that in some jobs. There's some jobs that are very what should I say? They're pretty technical and requires a great deal of expertise. And when you go to recruit in the immediate area around Hackettstown, you may not have that expertise. But
Hmm.
when you open that up nationally, right? Because if they don't have to come to campus, they can work from wherever they are. We've done
Hmm.
that in a couple of cases, and so we got great expertise, much better quality out of that, and they're not putting a strain on the road. They're not being looking for parking. They're spending all their time working doing the job, and that's worked out great. So there's two things that I think have really helped. And the other thing is classroom technology. I think we're using the impact on the students, and the students that are in class now are products of the pandemic, so they've been used to this for quite a while. But that you can have a mixed technology. You can have in class, you can have remote, you can have a hybrid of that. Just a different way of looking at education. What that does is that opens up the aperture for many more students that's their preferred way of learning. So if you learned best online, um, and in 2019 you probably didn't come to Centenary, but now you can, because we have a number of online classes, and hopefully we're getting more and more, and having that more accessible. And
Right.
so those are some definite positives that came out of the pandemic.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So, socially, student life-wise, I was just curious how did Centenary address the social and community aspects of student life during the COVID-19 pandemic? And did you guys come up with any creative or unique initiatives that aimed to maintain a sense of community despite the physical distance?
Well, we did. I mean, I think we had to do that in all areas. So student life, I think, was one of the biggest challenges, because by its very nature, I think student life means everybody gets together, and does something together as a group, as one. But they had Zoom activities. They tried to do things that they could maintain social distancing if when we finally did come back on campus. So they worked at that. Another challenge for student life was students in the residence halls when they had to be quarantined. And so, I mean, that put a burden on everything. So we had to set aside rooms for quarantine. We had to set aside one semester. We set aside an entire residence hall for quarantine. We had to have them served in their room by the cafeteria,
Hmm.
and things like that. But yes, trying to come up with those ideas. I think the vice president for student affairs did a great job in coming up with those things. The other part of that is that student affairs was sort of a what can I say, a conduit to the other schools about what they're doing, not only in the things you typically think of student life, but also in vaccination policy and other kinds of health related stuff. And it was student life that actually became the lead person for the whole COVID. In fact, Carrie Mullins, we called her COVID Carrie because she would give the report on COVID. We'd talk about the dashboards and we talk about what the rates are, and she kept very connected to the Warren County Health Department, very connected to the state health department, and so forth. So student life, their role shifted to some stuff they hadn't done before. At least they hadn't done it to that magnitude and for so many students before. And so it was very student life became very important. I know students were there were two in this fall, beginning of fall, say September, August, September of 2020, there were basically two kinds of students. The ones that really wanted to come back to class and student activities and stuff like that. And they were hounding us all the time. We want to come back, we want to come back. And then there were the ones that were petrified
Hmm.
and they didn't want to get infected and they didn't want to do this. So that was a very difficult time. And I spent nights, losing sleep over, well, what should we do? Should we come back or should we stay closed? Should we come back or stay closed? And that's when one night I just had the idea, well, we'll give them a choice, a centenary choice. We called it the centenary choice. And so you could take the class either in class live, and we had social distancing. So we spread the chairs out, we wiped stuff down. You came in one door, went out the other, wore masks, for example, all of that. Or you could do the same class remotely at the same time, same class. And I thought it was important to understand that. So I taught a class that semester. I taught an honors class, and there were 14 students in it. I remember this because 7 of them came to class and 7 of them wanted to go remote.
Hmm.
And it worked out very well. That drove us to come up with some other ways. I asked IT, find us some good cameras so that remote experience is more like class. And that's why we came up with the owl. I don't know if you've seen the owl used. It looks like a thermos bottle, but it's a great big speaker, and on top is a 360
Oh,
degree.
yes, I have seen
And
that. Yeah.
so like if I'm talking to a student here and a student over here asks a question, it splits screens and it gets all 3 of us. Okay. And then the whole time it keeps it. And I asked students at the end, I said, well, is that more like the in-class experience? And they said, yes, it was. It was better. It's not perfect. It's
Hmm.
not just like class. But it keeps you from hiding, and it gets you out there, and it makes you feel like you're part of the class. So we did that, and it worked. It worked, I think, very well.
Finally, looking back, is there anything that you find to be the most significant lesson learned from this experience during the COVID-19 pandemic? Are there any specific stories that stand out to you as a representative of this historic moment in our school's history?
Well, a lot of them. I mean, we talked about some of them already. One that we didn't talk about was and this could come up in a different setting in a different kind of way, but I'll just talk about it a little bit. And that was the vaccination policy.
Mm.
You recall that nobody, so we didn't have any defense for it at first, and then all of a sudden we had a vaccination. And then, so we had to make a decision. Do you require a vaccination or not? And if you look across the country, you could see it was all over the charts. People requiring, not requiring, whatever. So we came up with a policy after a lot of discussion, talk with other people, and talk with the doctors and everything else. We came up with a mandatory vaccination policy. And then I told the cabinet, look, we know we're not going to get 100% of the students and faculty and staff vaccinated. We know that that's not going to happen. So how does that not happen? And we said, well, you got to allow for a medical. If the person's doctor says this person should not be vaccinated, we're not going to make them get vaccinated. That doctor has said that they shouldn't be vaccinated, and so you can submit a medical exemption. And we came up with a religious exemption. If your religion, there are some religions that don't believe in vaccinations, and if you're a clergy person or whatever says that's part of their religion, so you have that. But I knew there was something else. I knew that there were people that just didn't want to get vaccinated
Hmm.
for whatever reason. And so I had a third category, and that third category was conscientious objection. I have a conscientious objection. And so I said, so everybody has to get vaccinated unless you have a waiver, unless you have an exemption, one of these three exemptions. And so we processed that. And I wound up speaking to about 110, I think it was maybe 105 students and maybe five employees. And they had to come in and talk to me. I thought first of all, just the threat of coming in and talking to me would say, "Oh, forget it, I'll get vaccinated."
Yeah.
But 105 students
My
and
goodness.
five employees said no. They came in and they explained it to me. And I tell you, I learned so much about our students just getting to know them a little bit better.
Mhm.
To start off ice breaking, well, how you doing, Joe? How was your summer? What's going on? And kind of get it. And then I would say, well, I understand that you don't want to get vaccinated in accordance with our policy. Tell me about it. And they were pretty open about it. I got some amazing stories from that, and some of them seemed kind of hokey, and I approved almost everyone. The ones I didn't approve was somebody said, "You can't make me," because the Supreme Court had already said that you can make them.
Right.
So those I disapproved maybe three or four, but most of them I approved. And I tell you what, there were some kids. I had kids that said, "My parents don't want me to. In fact, I've already gotten vaccinated, but I don't want my parents to know." So I said, "Okay, I'll get
Oh
you an
my
exemption."
gosh.
Something like that.
Wow.
And I had others that were just confused. And I had one. I remember one young man who said, if I get vaccinated, my mom's going to kick me out, and I'll have no place to live. And I mean, incredible stories. I learned so much from that. And obviously, it's private, and I can't share names and stuff like that. But just those kinds of that thing that I learned from it. So I learned again, was reinforced the value of getting to know students, the value of getting to know employees more, finding out what they're having. And I even said, to other people, so here we're presenting a problem out there for a student, and we're asking that student to take a position on an issue that's of national and international importance, and we're asking them to take a stand on that. And then we had them write it up, to put it in writing, and then come in and discuss it. I mean, we should have been given academic credit for that. It was like, that's why we exist.
Mhm.
So I'm proud of that. Some of the lasting things, I think we're always going to now have some kind of hybrid classes and remote classes that we didn't have before. The other thing about the work setting, we're still trying to figure that out. Do you come in every day, 5 days a week? Do you come in 3 days a week, 2 days a week? How do we do that? All obviously, if you're a student facing job, and it requires you to actually be there, we've got to figure out ways that somebody is always there to do that. So I think what it did was it opened our minds. It opened our minds a great deal for the capabilities. We got through the pandemic, I think, very well. We had very few. We had a much lower incident rate than a lot of other schools. We didn't have any total outbreaks. We had a few clusters, but we didn't have any total outbreaks. And it was just something. There's an old saying that doesn't kill you, strengthens you. And I think that the pandemic, as bad as it was, we'd never want to have it again. But I do think we learned from it, and I think we came together. I'm very proud of the leadership. I'm very proud of the faculty. I'm very proud of the students. Students did some things that were great. And I used to give out coins, and I gave out coins to students for various things. There was a group that they were doing this for I think it was for the state or for the federal government. They were just observing. They were taking data on who wears a mask, are they wearing it correctly. They weren't interrupting. They were just standing there and making notes, and they turned that in. And so they were actually engaged in research that was part of a national study on mask wearing stuff. Now,
Mm.
you don't get a chance to do that kind of thing very
Yeah.
often, but it
Yeah.
was great.